I think it's important to play out some of those scenarios, some of those what-if scenarios in your mind ahead of time so you can be prepared.
It's time for the My Retirement Clarity Podcast with Lee Perkins, financial planner and president of J.L. Perkins Wealth Management. Get ready for a good dose of inspiration, simplicity, implementation, and of course, clarity on how to successfully prepare for retirement and grow and preserve your wealth. Here's Ben George with Lee Perkins.
Well, hello and welcome in to My Retirement Clarity. I'm Ben George alongside Lee Perkins, owner and financial advisor at J.L. Perkins Wealth Management. And as you mentioned there in the open, Lee, we are going through some major life events today. And I guess everybody maybe doesn't want to think about a lot of these. Some of them are positive, but a lot of times they're negative because they're just tough to deal with. But with these big events come big decisions.
Yeah, we've always heard the saying, the one thing that is constant is change, and helping people deal with changes that come throughout their lives is something that we do, and something that makes our job as a financial planning firm very important. And it's really why I love what I do so much, because every situation is different. It's never the same thing. Even though the challenge may be similar, how you approach them and how you handle them is going to be completely different. So, but again, seeing the value that we add when people are going through the highs and lows of life, it's really fulfilling. So yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Is it tough on you going through these events too? I know you're not going through them firsthand, right? But you built such close relationships with all the people you work with. Is it difficult going through these as well?
Yeah, it really is, because you kind of play out the situation as if I was there. I mean, I had somebody in my office last week, and we were talking about a coworker that they've known forever, who passed away unexpectedly, got sick and passed away a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks after they retired. And they retired early because they were dying. And it just really hit this person hard. And you just start thinking, I just start putting myself in the situation and thinking, man, life is precious and you just never know. So, but that's one of the, I guess one of the tough ones, but some of the fun ones is seeing people transition to the next phase of their life where there's all the opportunity and the time abundance and time freedom that I can be excited with them too. So yeah, it's interesting to go through it with my clients.
All right, so we'll discuss these 7 life events today and talk about maybe some tips and some guidance to help you make decisions, and maintain financial stability, which is a big part of this as well, as we go through today's episode. If you want to follow up with Lee afterwards, just go to talkwithlee.com. Again, talkwithlee.com. Schedule a meeting right there through that website with him. And if you want to follow up and learn more about J.L. Perkins Wealth, or go access all of our podcasts, go to myretirementclarity.com. All right, let's begin on a positive note, Lee. Marriage, a big life event, maybe one of the biggest days in most people's lives. But with that comes all the talk of the finances.
Yeah, I think who you're going to marry is truly one of the biggest decisions that you're ever going to make, and I think one of the main things. I mean, we'll get to finances in a second. I think one of the main things that you have to be, you got to make sure you're going to be on the same page from a religion standpoint. I think this is critical. I think you need to be on the same page about kids. Are you going to have kids? You're not going to have kids, and probably. I think nowadays you probably need to make sure you're on the same page politically. And this is something that I've never really thought about before. But if you're not on the same page politically, I think it could make it difficult going forward, because society is going to sort of train you that the other side is always wrong. And if you're bringing that to a marriage, boy, it could really cause some big time issues. Not always. I've got several client couples who are on the opposite side politically, and they sort of deal with it. But yeah, so it's not all about finances, but I know that's what we're talking about here. So one of the first things typically that newlyweds will ask is about combining their finances. And I'm of the opinion that if you are a younger couple, this is your first marriage, you should combine your finances. Unless there's something unique about your situation, I see no reason at all not to marry your finances. I think this should really be a big part of any premarital counseling that goes on. We know that most divorces are caused by money and money issues and money problems. So go ahead and address these things up front and make sure that everybody is on the same page. One of my best friends is a pastor here in town, and as a part of his premarital counseling, they talk finances. And so I think that's a vital piece of it. Another thing that people ask me is about a prenuptial agreement. Should I do that? So in my opinion, unless somebody comes into a marriage with, tons of more assets than the other person, I don't recommend a prenup, especially for a young couple just starting out. To me, it's like having an easy button to get out of the marriage. So it's almost like you're kind of planning to get a divorce, and I don't think that's healthy to start out a marriage. So anyway, I think there needs to be a level of trust that if you're going to marry somebody, then, we're going in this, we're all in. Now, of course, this gets muddy in a second or third marriage situation, but we can talk about that in just a second, sort of in the next category that we're talking about.
Yeah, no question. There's kind of a 3 parts to that process, but marriage is kind of where it all begins, and there's a lot that goes into it. And as you said, finding that right person, it's one of the biggest decisions you'll make, just in terms of happiness and stability and everything else that goes into leading a very good and enjoyable life. But for those that maybe don't find the right partner the first time, Lee, there's always remarriage, right, as well. And there's some different decisions that come in here, right?
Yeah, remarriages can get a little bit more complicated than a first marriage when it comes to finances. It shouldn't be this way, but I think the reality is I'm going to look at the finances a little bit differently, especially if there are children from previous marriages. And of course, anytime an older person, and that definition of an older person changes for me as I age. Anytime an older person remarries, the antennas come up with the adult children, because the first thing they want to know is, hey, what's the motive of this person who's now interested in my mom or my dad? And it's a natural question to ask, and I think it's a fair question to ask. And I know this is different for everybody, but for most of our clients who have remarried later in life, say in their 60s or 70s, nothing really changed from a beneficiary standpoint. Her beneficiaries are still her kids. His beneficiaries are still his kids. Now, I know there can be some adjustments in this, but I just think the best thing to do up front is to make sure everybody is aware of what happens when somebody passes away, because the last thing anybody wants is for something to sort of shady to go on. Maybe somebody's been around for a year or two and then go and inherit all the assets that were intended to go to their own children. So, unfortunately, that happens. I hate to even have to address that, but the reality is sometimes people have sort of a less than pure motivation. And sometimes people ask me, they'll say, Lee, how do we handle the money coming in and going out once we're married, and whose money do we spend? Well, I would tell you what I see in a majority of the situations. They usually keep separate banking accounts for their savings and things like that, which makes sense. But then they'll have one joint account that they run the household budget out of. And so each person will have a certain amount of money coming into the account, and then bills are paid out of that account as a couple. And I think that's a healthy way to do it.
All right, we're talking about 7 life events that lead to 7 big decisions, especially financially. Job changes is next. This is a category of people that you've probably been dealing with a little bit more, as people have been kind of forced into early retirement or just kind of rethinking their career here through all the COVID stuff. But with job changes come a lot of things you have to think about financially.
Yeah, and this happens more and more, like you said, nowadays, especially as companies are starting to feel the impact of the economy sort of slowing down a little bit. I've talked to a lot of people recently who are, of course, they're afraid they're going to be downsized. A lot of Geico folks right now are facing this, that there's a lot of realignment going on with that company, and people are sort of being pushed out the door, and a lot of others are worried that they could be next, and they're not really sure if they're ready to retire or if they're going to have to go back to work at another job. So of course, if you're in this boat, whether it's with Geico or some other company, reach out to us, and I'd love to have a 15-minute conversation with you. And you can do that by going to talkwithlee.com, and you can grab a 15-minute slot on my calendar, and I'll be happy to assess your situation and sort of provide a little bit of clarity. But even if here's one thing I would say, even if you're at a company where you feel like your position is pretty secure, it still makes sense to start planning, because you never know when something could happen that maybe would change your timeline on retirement. And I'm not talking about something just going on with your company where you're forced out. I'm talking about maybe a change in your health, a change in the situation with your kids or maybe your parents. And it doesn't have to be negative. It can be anything. But what if your company offers you some type of buyout? And that does happen. Several years ago, it went on with federal employees, and they were giving people money to check out early and retire. And a lot of those people had never really thought about retiring and had to make a decision fairly quickly. So I think it's important to play out some of those scenarios, some of those what if scenarios in your mind ahead of time so you can be prepared.
Well, I know with job changes too, Lee, there's a lot of thought about taxes too, as you're kind of setting up your checks and your accounts and your retirement contributions and that sort of thing. But when you think about taxes, you got to always be thinking about tax planning and looking ahead. And that's why we always offer on this show the opportunity to get your hands on one of Lee's books.
Yeah, because we are firmly of the opinion that taxes will increase in the future. So if you think taxes are going to go down in the future, you wouldn't be interested in this book. But if you think they're going to go up, I would say, hey, this will be a resource that you should get. And you get the book by texting the word diffuse to 478-475-2050. Give us a good name and contact information, and we'll ship a book out to you free of charge.
All right, very good. And if you have questions for Lee, talkwithlee.com. You can schedule a call with him right there. All right, a few more I want to go through with you, Lee. Bringing a new child into the family, right? Whether it be through childbirth or through child adoption, either way, it's such an exciting time, right? And there's so much hope and so many dreams, but there's a lot of new expenses that come along with that as well.
Exactly. And I don't really know exactly what to say on this one. It's been a long time since our kids were born and sort of the emotions that we faced during that was going on. But I would tell you this, budgeting for a kid is impossible. All I can tell you is they're very, very expensive, and they get more expensiver the older they get. You just got to be able to, and willing to make some sacrifices going forward. And I'm not just talking about financial sacrifices. There's a lot of other sacrifices you'll make along the way just because of the new child. And you can talk to anybody who's ever had kids before, and they'll tell you how their lives changed. And I'm not saying that it's bad. It's just different. I can't imagine not having kids. And for us, it was one of the best decisions that we've ever made. But there are some really big decisions that follow that. And usually one of the first things that happens when there's a newborn is grandparents want to start contributing to some type of college fund, which is natural. Meanwhile, the new parents, they're trying to figure out if maybe mom is going to stay home with the baby or go back to work. And then once they figure that out, they got to figure out where they're going to send their kids to preschool, or do we do public school or private school? And if we do private school, where's the money going to come from? If we're going to do public school, where do we have to live? So, all those kind of things come into play. And then here's a couple of decisions, Ben, that I think people don't really think about early on, but eventually you will. You're going to wind up with a new friend group, because the social circle that you run in is likely going to be built around the activities that your kids are involved in, which is fine. But as you learn more about people, you're going to find that not everybody raises their kids the way that you do, whatever that means. But more importantly, they may not share your same values. And so how you handle those things and how your kid is going to want to go spend the night with somebody that, hey, you don't really, you got some concerns about the family, and you got to have some tough conversations. So yeah, a long story short, kids are complicated. They're expensive, but I wouldn't change our decision to have kids at all. And I know you wouldn't either.
Yeah. You can't ever picture your life without them, right? Once you have them, you just kind of wonder what the meaning of your life would be without having those children. Yeah, it's such a big deal.
Yep.
And they are expensive, to your point. I'm not
Yes.
excited about the fact that you said they get more and more expensive as you age.
Just wait. Yeah. Because you got yours young. Yeah. Mine are older and expensive.
Child care is pretty expensive at this age, but I guess the money just kind of shifts around from one party to the next, right?
It does. Hey folks, Lee Perkins here. If you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, you know how much I hate taxes, and I know you probably do too. Our politicians are completely out of control. Their spending is off the chart, and you've got to be prepared for increasing taxes in the future. So we've written a book called Diffuse, 7 Steps to Protecting Your 401k or IRA from the Ticking Tax Time Bomb. You're going to want to grab a copy of this book and learn how you can protect yourself. Then you'll have to decide if you want to take action right now or if you'd rather wait until the IRS changes the rules of the game. Either way, the choice is yours. To get a free copy of the book, just text the word diffuse to 478-475-2050. That's DEFUSE to 478-475-2050. And we'll send you a free copy. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show.
All right. Got a couple more I want to go through here with you. Lee, on a more somber note, the death of a spouse, something we don't want to plan for, but if you're in a marriage or have a partner, there's a good chance that you will have to maybe experience that. And with that comes so many decisions that have to be made, and trying to deal with the financial side, such an emotional time to do that, it can be overwhelming.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is one that I've had a lot of experience dealing with over the last few years. And if you think about it, most marriages that don't wind up end in a divorce are going to end with the death of one spouse prior to the other one. It's rare that both spouses die at the same time. So that means one person is going to wind up having to face life without the spouse that they lived with for most of their life. And so this is why I always stress the importance of both spouses being involved in the family finances. But I'll still tell you today, Ben, and I harp on my clients about this. Probably half of the couples that come in my office, they have one spouse who just sort of lets the other spouse take care of things. They trust them completely, and which is great. But sometimes it can leave them completely in the dark and potentially vulnerable if the other spouse passes away before they do, because they have to try to learn a whole lot of things. And so this is why we try to encourage both a husband and a wife to come in for their annual review meetings. And most of the times they do, but still we've got a few couples that they just have one spouse attend those review meetings and usually say that, my husband's not interested in this, or my wife, she's not interested in this at all. So, I get that. I would have a very difficult time getting Pam to come in and sit down and talk with somebody about our finances. Sometimes just it's not a fun exercise, but it's a critical conversation that has to happen. So one of the best things I would say that you can do for your spouse, especially if you are the one who is involved, is to have some type of notebook or folder or some kind of book or a centralized place where you keep all of your financial information. And I mean passwords, logins, important contact information, like your CPA, your attorney, your banker, and of course your financial advisor. And we provide this to all of our clients. We put that book together. We can't give them all the information to put in it. They have to be responsible for putting the information in there to make that client binder useful. But we try to do our best to encourage that. So anyway, these are those people that you put in there. Those are the people that the surviving spouse is definitely going to lean on if their spouse predeceases them. So yeah, a lot of moving parts when there's a death of a spouse.
All right. What about parents moving in with you, Lee? This is a big event for someone that's getting close to retirement, and they need to take care of their parents, which they really want to do and are happy to do so, but maybe haven't prepared for financially.
Yeah, we're seeing more and more of this nowadays, aging parents. It's usually a widow or a widower who wind up moving back in with the kids. And what we're seeing in the real world is they move back in. And of course, it can take a huge toll financially. But I think even more than the financial toll is an emotional toll that happens to the caregiver. And I've seen this, and Ben, you've probably seen it before too. people seem to age quicker than they normally would if they're taking care of, their parent or their grandparent or somebody else in their house. And I don't know if it's true, but physically when I look at them, I can see that. So of course, what happens, from a financial standpoint is once they move into your house, you may have to make some physical modifications to the house, widen doors or all those kind of things. The house that we just built, moved into back in December, we made sure that we put in wide doors. We also have a spot in our garage where we could add a ramp just in case we need it in the future. And so we actually left room for the ramp just in case either of our parents need help coming inside of our house. We're not necessarily planning for them to come live with us. That wasn't, we didn't really accommodate for that. Now they certainly could. If they're listening, Mom and Dad, you're welcome to come move in, or Miss Diane, Pam's mom. But we want to make it easier for them to visit with us if certainly if they don't age the way they want to and they wind up in a wheelchair or something like that. But again, part of this whole conversation is not just limited to parents moving back in with you. We could also talk about adult children moving back in with their parents. And this is very common. As a matter of fact, man, the two things that I see most of my clients spend most of their money on is remodeling a house, meaning a bedroom or a bathroom or a kitchen remodel, something like that, or financially supporting an adult kid, which, there's all kind of ways we could take that conversation from an enabling standpoint. But my parents tell my brother and I all the time how grateful that they are that we actually have jobs. And so sort of a low bar of expectations, I guess, because they see their friends who've got kids that are in their mid to early 50s that are, moving back in and mooching off of them. And so, yeah, that's not something that you want to do.
No, it's not. All right. One last one here on our 7 life events. Retirement, Lee. We can't get out of here without talking about retirement. It is, again, one of the biggest events of your lifetime. And with that, plenty of decisions, which we often talk about here.
Yeah, we can't do a show about big decisions without talking about one of what I think is one of the most important ones, and that is retirement. It's what we do, something that we help people with every single day. So for most people, and there's some exceptions to this, but for most people, there's a lot that has to be factored in to the decision before they actually pull the trigger to retire. It's just not as easy as it was, 25, 35 years ago. The world's changed, and decisions that you have to make have changed. And I could probably do a whole show on what you need to factor in before you decide to retire. Maybe I'll work on a show for that over the next few weeks and dig a little bit deeper into details on this. But for right now, Ben, I think I'll just highlight a few things that need to be addressed, sort of at a high level. And first of all would be where's the income going to come from, which means how do you structure withdrawals from your assets and then coordinate that with other income sources like pension or Social Security or things like that. And then, of course, that leads into when do you claim Social Security? Do you claim early, or does it make sense to delay it a little bit? And, how do you plan for the death of a spouse when they lose a Social Security? So that has to come into consideration. And something I talked about in a recent podcast, maybe 2 months ago, is how do you fill your day? Don't underestimate the importance of having something meaningful to do when you retire. You can't just play golf all the time. You can't play pickleball all the time. There's got to be something more, or you could wind up struggling with your self-worth. And this does happen. It's pretty common. Taxes is another one. How do you handle taxes in retirement? And for most of the listeners to this podcast, I would say 85 to 95% of their retirement savings is in a qualified retirement account, like a 401k, a 457B, a TSP, or an IRA. You're going to pay taxes on all this when you draw it out. So when taxes increase, not if, but when taxes increase, you're going to get less from every dollar that you pull out. So you got to factor that in. And of course, something that we just talked about is how do you handle getting older from a healthcare standpoint, meaning who takes care of you when you can no longer take care of yourself because just the natural process of aging, and that gets really expensive. And then maybe, the final one I'll touch on here, because I know we're running short on time today, is going to be how you invest your money in a way that ensures that it's going to be there for you when you need it. But more importantly, whatever that strategy is, can you remain disciplined in both up markets and down markets? And a lot of people really struggle with this. So I know there's a lot going on here, and I want to make sure that people know that they don't have to do this alone. They don't have to go at it alone. So again, you can connect with us by visiting the website, www.talkwithlee.com, and set up a 15-minute phone call to discuss the challenges that you face.
Very good. Again, talkwithlee.com. That is the best way to get on Lee's schedule. Now let's shift gears and talk a little bit about some questions that have come in here, Lee, to the show, and see what you think about these. I got one from Rob we'll start off with. He is in Sandy Springs. Says, our company just got bought out, and there are rumors that most of us are going to be offered an early retirement offer. What do these offers normally include, and what should I be doing, if anything, to be prepared?
Yeah, Rob, I don't know what company you're with and how that buyout's going to be structured, so I can't really give you any specific details. But I would tell you this, though. If they're going to give you some type of buyout, and I've seen this happen, where the buyout is added to your last paycheck. So let's say it's $25,000. And like I mentioned earlier, we saw this with federal employees several years ago. They were offered a $25,000 buyout. Be prepared to have a huge chunk of taxes taken out of that final paycheck. And so for most of these people, they saw a net of, between $15,000 and $17,000. So for a lot of people, it was an over withholding. So they got some of it back come tax time, but they were really shocked at the amount of taxes that were withheld on that last paycheck. So just be aware of that. So, good luck with it. I hope you get the buyout if that's what you want to get. I know it's kind of scary when your company changes hands, like it sounds like it's happened to your situation. A lot of uncertainty there, but best of luck to you.
Yeah, best of luck to you, Rob. All right, David is in Panama City. Says, I'm positive that I have more than enough money saved to last the rest of my life. There's just no way I could spend it all. Not bragging, I just find myself in a very blessed position. So is there any advice you'd give to somebody like me, or can I just coast my way through life, financially speaking?
Yeah, so this is a pretty common theme, and a lot of our clients are sort of in the same position. And I had a similar conversation with somebody recently, and what we decided to do, and we agreed that he and his wife are never going to spend all their money or even come close to it. What we decided to do was go ahead and set up monthly distributions so that the money shows up in their checking account every single month. And their thinking was, hey, if it's in the checking account, I got a much better chance of spending it than if it's just sitting in their IRAs, sort of out of sight and out of mind. And I've done this before for people, and it really works well. So, David, I think this is something you might want to try. We are very good at that in our household. If it is in our checking account, it is going to be spent. I can't say it's just my wife and my two kids, and I will throw myself in there. We are world-class spenders. So if it is in there, we will spend the money. So again, I'm not saying go out and spend money haphazardly or on just crazy things, but give yourself permission to spend. And I would say this is a cool thing to do. Keep a roll of $100 bills in your pocket and give one to a waitress every now and then, just as a tip. Do that and see how it changes how you think about money and how you can really be a blessing to other people. So thanks, David, for your question. I appreciate you listening to the show.
Yeah, and it's all about being able to use that money to help others out if you can, and it's great to be in that position, and we appreciate you reaching out and asking that question to us. If you have questions for Lee, just visit myretirementclarity.com. You can find out everything you need to know about J.L. Perkins Wealth Management there, plus get some great tools and resources that Lee offers, but also the easiest way to get on his calendar is talkwithlee.com. You can do that by visiting the site right now. All right, Lee, we'll close it out on that note. I know some important conversations to have today. I'm glad we did, and we thank you for your time.
I appreciate it, Ben. It's been a lot of fun. Take care.
Thank you for listening to My Retirement Clarity for Lee Perkins over at J.L. Perkins Wealth Management there in Macon, Georgia. I am Ben George. Have a good week.
Lee Perkins here, and I want to thank you so much for tuning into the show today. If you like our podcast, we would be honored if you would share the show with others. And one great way to do that is by posting the show to your social media pages or by just telling others about it. Either way, we would really appreciate it. And of course, if you do enjoy the show, we would appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star review. And this certainly helps other people like you find our show. And if you want to learn a little more about our firm and how we help people have the best retirement they can possibly have, go check us out at www.myretirementclarity.com. There are a lot of great resources that you can access directly on the website. And of course, if you want to have a conversation with me, you can visit www.talkwithlee.com, and this will take you directly to my calendar. And there you can schedule a 15-minute phone call so I can learn a little bit more about your situation. Of course, everybody is not a great fit for our firm, but if I think we can add value and put you in a better situation, I'll let you know, and we can certainly talk about the next steps. So thanks again for tuning into the show, and we'll catch you next time.
Investment advisory services are offered by J.L. Perkins Wealth Management, a registered investment advisor and insurance agency. Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, legal, or investment advice. Always consult with a qualified tax, legal, or investment professional before taking any action.